Hello, and welcome to Bold Call, a monthly live stream from Digiday Media, in which our journalists from Digiday will gather together to make big claims based on our reporting of the media and marketing industries. And so today I've got joining me Seb Joseph, who is our executive editor of news. What's up, Seb?
What's up, Tim? Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. I mean, you were kind of like one of the big impetus for doing this because we had a conversation a couple weeks ago thinking about doing a bold call in video form. You've been doing a lot of these on the site in article versions. And it seemed like the programmatic open market was kind of the takeaway from that conversation. So I'm excited to talk with you about it today.
Yeah, like where do we start, right? I'm sure we'll get into it kind of later on, but it's a timeless kind of topic, but very timely as well at the moment. So
right, yeah, that's something we're definitely gonna have to tackle. Is like, well, isn't it always kind of been a rough spot? But we'll get to that. So, and then also joining us today is Ronan Shields, our senior ad tech reporter. What's up, Ronan? Ronan, I think you're muted. No, it's not coming through. We're live. This is bound to happen, so we'll get this sorted out. If anyone is getting triggered by the days of Zoom happy hours and virtual events in April, May 2020, me too. I remember doing, I think, one of our first virtual events in like May 2020, and we ran into some technical snafus. I think at one point we had a guest whose internet dropped out in the middle of a session, and I had to just kind of rant like I am right now as we get it sorted out. So that's all good. Ronan, we good now? No, we are not. That's all right. Although this could be a fun, like, bad lip read. Have any of you seen those bad lip reading videos? Like, they do them, what is it, after NFL seasons, I think it is. Seb, let me bring you in while Ronan gets sorted out. Have you seen these bad lip reading videos?
I've seen them, yeah. Too funny.
I feel like we can do something like that. There's also a TikTok trend these days around, like, I think it's like deaf girl reads like celebrities, like what celebrities are saying at like the Oscars and things like that. So we try to do that there. But you know, while we wait for Ronan's audio to get sorted out. So one of the reasons why we wanted to do this bold call specifically on programmatic, and specifically today, March 19th, is this coming Friday, March 21st, Ronan is going to be launching his weekly ad tech briefing. So put that on the screen. Seb, can you talk a bit about what's going to be in store for the ad tech briefing?
Yeah, look, I think the world isn't necessarily short of newsletters focused on kind of ad tech or platforms for that matter, but we felt that there's space needed for one spearheaded by kind of Ronan Shields, particularly given the viewpoint and expertise that he has on ad tech, which is really fundamentally about the business of it. And so essentially that's what the newsletter on when it launches on kind of Friday will kind of be about. It will kind of be a sort of forensic analytical take on, you know, a part of the market that always feels like it's in a state of flux, but I think now more than ever is really grappling with some existential sort of challenges. And, I think really looking at the kind of business of it, the kind of ebb and flow of kind of money around it, the kind of classic tenets of kind of Digiday. We felt that the time was right to build a newsletter product around it, but then within that also do something that we haven't really tried before, which is really tap into the kind of community element of it. I think ad tech, more than many parts of the kind of advertising and media sector, has a kind of vibrant network and sort of audience that is really engaged in a lot of the kind of subject kind of matter. I think you see that on a lot of the kind of posts that we put out there on kind of social. And we felt that there was a way to really tap into that, given Ronan Shields' sort of network, given the viewpoint that he has, given the expertise that he brings to this space, to really kind of use all of that as a way to kind of make the newsletter more of a two-way sort of product that kind of isn't just about kind of Ronan's take, but also weaves in the kind of viewpoint, opinions, and kind of thoughts and experiences of the kind of audience in a way that we haven't necessarily done here at Digiday before.
Right. Awesome. And so let's make this two-way conversation now. Three-way conversation. We'll bring Ronan back in. Ronan, can you hear us now, or can we hear you? No. I'm tempted to just kind of leave you on screen and just join us as like kind of the silent party. But okay, so maybe we'll try to get that sorted backstage. But let's kind of, so I was trying to think of like how we want to structure this conversation, because obviously we're making the bold call that the programmatic open market is fucked. We need to back that up. And I feel like there's all kinds of ways in which we can kind of back that up right now. Yep. One thing, looking at just the stock prices this morning from the Trade Desk, from PubMatic, from Magnite, they're all down. Trade Desk is down 55% since February 12th when Trade Desk reported earnings. Magnite is down by more than that, if I'm not mistaken. Or I think it's like 30-something percent, 37% maybe for Magnite since February 7th, which is when Analytics published a report on advertisers ads running on CSAM against CSAM content, CSAM content. And then PubMatic stock price is down 44% since February 12th Trade Desk earnings. So that Analytics report seems like it had a lot to do with the current situation facing programmatic marketing industry. But then there's also the Scope 3 launch on the other side of things, which seems kind of indicative of what needs to be fixed in the programmatic marketing industry. Seb, which do you feel like is a clear indication of like why the programmatic open market may be screwed?
Yeah, I think it's hard to kind of zero in on one and think of them all as kind of interlocked sort of factors. I think just before we kind of dig into that, it's probably worth just really level setting when it comes to kind of how we got here, right? Because, as you sort of mentioned before, I feel like we've been writing about this topic for a decade or so now. And I don't really think the factors have kind of changed. I think there's kind of three kind of core ones that kind of persist. And, I think, the open market has always been riddled by transparency issues, right? It's, it's plagued by murky supply paths, hidden fees, and fraud. But then you've also, on the other hand, got the brand safety and suitability sort of issues, right? Advertisers worry about where their ads appear now more than ever, to your point about the analytics kind of report. And that's led many of them to kind of shift to sort of direct deals and kind of P&Ps. And then, you've also got the point about signal loss with kind of third-party cookies disappearing and kind of new privacy restrictions. OpenRTB's reliance on kind of granular tracking, that third-party addressability is kind of, it's at risk, right? And so, I think all of those factors have kind of contributed to a sort of death by a thousand cuts predicament that the open sort of auction has kind of got itself into over the years. And I think whether it be the analytics report, whether it be, a rough Q4, that doesn't look like it looks like it's going to kind of feed into sort of Q1, and the what scope 3 are sort of trying to do, I think they're just damning indictments of all of that, right? I think you could kind of look at each of those and match them up to either of those kind of three kind of factors that have contributed to the point that we have come to with the open auction being systemically challenged, shall we say.
Right. And to that point, so you shared there is this eMarketer report that came out recently on R2B spending. I'm going to bring that up on the stage. If you could just kind of break down for folks who are watching just, the significance of this. Also, I should mention, we are live on LinkedIn here. Anyone watching, feel free to, drop comments. We'll be able to see those with any questions, feedback, or thoughts that you may have on the things that we're talking about. So again, you could just drop those comments in the stream. But
hello. Oh, sorry. Yeah, look, I think from what you can kind of see here, the kind of open exchange, it's 14.67 billion compared to sort of private marketplaces, which is nearly double that. And then I think over what's been interesting with this is that this just really it compounds what we've seen playing out over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, which is that you were starting to see that kind of share shift, in terms of kind of programmatic, because all of those kind of three factors that we talked about a few minutes ago have really kind of crystallized and made advertisers start to weigh up where they kind of where they sort of spend their money, right? And so, increasingly those direct deals, private marketplaces are making up, the kind of bulk of kind of programmatic advertising, and the open auction continues to kind of exist. And I don't think it will go anywhere. I don't think it will go anywhere anytime soon, but it continues to sort of hemorrhage money. And I think it will continue to do that unless, those systemic sort of issues that we talked about earlier are addressed in some shape or form.
Right. And what do you see as the low-hanging fruit in terms of systemic issues? You just wrote a piece, I believe, earlier this week on there's a lot of attention from the buy side on ad tech fees again, which again, it's one of those things hasn't there always been, but it seems like a new aspect to it this time around is curators fees. And there's been this curation trend, which was supposed to be part of further cleaning up the programmatic marketplace. But then it seems like a byproduct of that is, oh, well, now we have this question again of if I'm an advertiser, I put $1 in, how do I know how much of that is actually making it to the publisher?
Yeah, I think it requires a more sophisticated kind of viewpoint of kind of how the marketplace works. I think for a while there was this idea that kind of low fee routes to supply were going to solve a lot of issues and mean that more working media was getting to sort of publishers, and you could kind of fix everything by just kind of taking cost out of the kind of supply chain. I think the ANA report, the numerous analytics reports that have come out over the last several years have shown that to be wrong. And so, whilst I think understanding the fees and how they getting transparency on who's making what is an important factor, at least from the buyers that we're talking to, I think there's greater attention being paid to kind of provenance, right? How these impressions are being kind of sourced. And to your point, I think to some shape or form, that's where curation has come into play. but also why you're starting to see the buy side lean into that in maybe ways that they haven't done in the past, because curation has been around for a while, right? I just think that the buy side wasn't necessarily kind of taking notice in a way that they are now.
Seb, we got a comment from Vin Chung on LinkedIn. I'll bring the comment up here. What is your viewpoint on curated PMPs? This is, on topic because we're talking about kind of the fees here. Somewhat of a broad question. There's also just the question of like, how different are curated PMPs from traditional PMPs? Like I remember at our programmatic marketing summit in December of last year, asking a lot of even brand execs as well as agency execs about curation, and there was a lot of the answers I was getting from them is, well, what's the difference between a curated marketplace and a PMP? And so I wonder if like since then it's become clearer or fuzzier what is or is not a curated PMP or a curated marketplace.
Yeah, best way to do it. I think at a basic level, the difference would be, your PMPs involve like a direct negotiation between a single buyer and a single publisher, right? I think then, curation on the other hand, that allows a curator, whether it be an agency, data provider, SSP, or even a reseller to create a pre-packaged audience kind of segments or inventory pools that they then offer them to multiple buyers via a single ID. So it's the difference between the one-to-one versus the one-to-many would be kind of how I'd sort of break it down to its kind of purest kind of form.
Got it. Okay. Let's see if we could bring Ronan back in, and if we have better luck. I think this will be the third time's the charm.
Third time lucky.
Ronan, yeah, it says your mic isn't connected. So, well, it's good to see your face. We'll keep trying at this. and we'll just talk about you as if you're not here until that point. So we've talked a little bit about scope 3. I guess like one of the two other big kind of developments in the past month and a half when it comes to the programmatic open market is Trade Desk earnings and Trade Desk kind of response to what was considered disappointing earnings, where it seems like Trade Desk feels like a need to go more direct in working with brands through these joint ventures. And then the other one was the analytics report on the ads running against child sex abuse material. Which of those, do you feel like one has had more of an impact than the other, or would have like more long-term implications? Because the analytics report feels these kinds of controversies are always popping up. Last year it was what, Forbes and Colossus.
Yep. The ID spoofing, the MFA sort of furore. So, yeah.
And so, I mean, I'll bring that story on screen for anyone who's not familiar. But this was a report that highlighted ads are still running in places that advertisers would prefer them not to run. It's certainly not the first time there's been sort of this kind of controversy in programmatic, but continues to be this kind of controversy. And I think a lot of fingers ended up getting pointed to the verification firms like Double Verify and Integral Ad Science on why didn't they stop this? I remember last year with the Forbes story where Forbes was running ads on kind of like a subdomain as opposed to Forbes proper. Hearing from some agency executives was like, we don't really know what to do because this is why we hired DV and IAS, and it seems like they're having a challenge addressing this. It seems like part of what Scope 3 is trying to do is improve verification by throwing AI at it. I imagine that's a gross oversimplification. At the same time, it feels like effectively that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, like I think I think the Scope 3 kind of launch in some ways I think is like it's like I said I mentioned before. I think it's a damning indictment of the state of the open market, right? Too many point solutions have kind of created way too much fragmentation at the expense of, kind of innovation and just fundamental systems thinking. I think the fact that it's being done by one of the architects, of that kind of system only reinforces that point. That the open auction has some systemic flaws that kind of continually undermine its value. I think, you sort of pointed to and teed up Scope 3 kind of 2.0 it's an attempt to address all of that, right? It's kind of being pitched as kind of more of an effective and transparent alternative to ad verification, but it's hard to think the team at Scope 3 will kind of stop there, especially if advertisers take to it. Should that platform, kind of plug directly into the ad tech of enough publishers, then all of a sudden that proposition, behind Scope 3 starts to have some real existential implications, for RTB. Like, think about it. At what point does a buying interface like a DSP add value if a lot more of that decisioning is kind of being done by an advertiser's own AI agent that connects directly to a publisher, via the kind of Scope 3 kind of platform? Suddenly, the kind of inefficiencies and foibles of the open kind of auction start to kind of fade away, right? Sure, I get that, there are going to be issues around transparency into how those agents kind of work and, the fees that, a platform like Scope 3 kind of charges, but the underlying premise, at least in theory, could be solid, right? When it comes to addressing the clear needs of kind of open RTB. So that's what I would say on, kind of Scope 3 and how that kind of fits into, the topic of today.
Got it. But it seems like, because you did, for last week's Digiday Plus media briefing, you wrote the story on publishers' takes on Scope 3 and kind of the questions they were having about it. What was kind of like the top line in terms of why publishers aren't buying Scope 3? Is this just publishers are always a little wary of any ad tech intermediary? 100%. Is there more to it?
No, I think it's that. I think they're just wary when anyone comes bearing gifts, right? All that glitters isn't gold. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably kind of is. So I think, given how many times they've been burned by ad tech and platforms alike, they're just kind of very reticent to open themselves up to another vendor, another potential kind of industry, kind of taking money away from them.
Okay. And so then now we're at Trade Desk earnings. Trade Desk, didn't.
My favorite topic.
So, like, why was this such a big deal? Or seems like it was such a big deal because it took down not only Trade Desk stock, but programmatic stock as well.
Yeah, I think the Trade Desk for a long time has been a bellwether for ad tech. And so, when they sneeze, the rest of the ad tech industry sort of caught a cold. And, that the Q4, the fact that they kind of missed their earnings, that's the first time they've done that in 8 years. And so all of a sudden, the narrative around that business changed. In fairness, I think, I don't think that is necessarily down to how they kind of executed. I think it was a tough quarter for everyone. But also, I think it did in some ways bring to the surface a lot of concerns that people had about, the kind of Trade Desk kind of business and the kind of challenges that were kind of there in the background, but hadn't necessarily been come to the fore because, that business was just executing efficiently, relentlessly, quarter after sort of quarter. Now, all of a sudden, there was an excuse to bring all of that sort of stuff to the kind of fore. Do I think this means the end of the business or they kind of won't bounce back? No. I think the business is too robust, and there are too many kind of smart people working there for that to sort of happen. But it was almost like a reality check, right? And just did make people stop and think, particularly kind of Wall Street, kind of stop and think, actually, the kind of the post-pandemic kind of boom days, and then the sort of subsequent hangover that we'd sort of been experiencing in the 5 years kind of since, had sort of almost sort of caught up and was it kind of reached kind of the critical point in those sort of earnings. And so as a result, the whole narrative around kind of ad tech sort of starts to change, and it does become, oh, actually, is the open market as viable in the kind of short to sort of medium term as maybe we sort of anticipated? And I think that's why then the rest of ad tech starts to kind of get dragged into that sort of narrative. But again, like, narratives kind of change, and it will be interesting to kind of see how the next earning window sort of shakes out for them, and if the trade desk are able to, at least from a narrative perspective, kind of change that. Because to some degree, I thought there was a bit of self-flagellation sort of involved in those earnings calls, where they were just a bit too, I guess, honest about their own sort of contribution to why they missed earnings versus, the kind of broader sort of market.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Because there's also an element to all of this for certainly the trade desk, Magnite as well. I imagine this is true for PubMatic, but like, so much of their businesses is becoming CTV, which there is a open market for programmatic in CTV, but it's very small, and like, a lot of the big TV advertisers that we all think of when we think of the CTV ad market, they're not really playing in the open market. They're doing PMP deals, they're doing PG deals, they're doing just 100%. Traditional upfront. Like, I was looking at Magnite's earnings, and they broke out their contribution ex traffic acquisition costs for Q4. 43% of it came from CTV. And so this idea of the open programmatic market being in a tough spot, as we titled this entire live stream, how big a deal is that if so much of the programmatic market is becoming CTV?
I guess it depends on how much of CTV continues to be accessible to kind of ad tech, right? Like, it'll be interesting to get your take, given that you follow it closely, but strategies kind of shift. I think you kind of seen that with kind of Netflix, since it kind of made the call that it was going to move into sort of advertising. How many times have they shifted? Twice, 3 times maybe? And I guess that's the kind of risk, right? It's as advertising becomes a bigger, more strategically important part of how, these kind of media owners and retail businesses, essentially kind of boost profitability. And, all of a sudden it becomes more strategically imperative to control a lot more of that kind of process. So I don't know if that chimes with what you've kind of seen in the sort of space, Tim, given that, you're the author of the kind of Future of TV Media Briefing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely does, because last year for the upfront market, like, the big change in the upfront market last year, and for anyone who doesn't live and breathe this stuff, God love you for it. Upfront market, every year, TV networks, streaming services, advertisers, agencies agree to spend X millions of dollars over the next year. So it's a futures market. And historically, those were all direct deals, direct IO type deals. Programmatic was like kind of a piece to it, but not really. It was a whole other thing separately. The big change last year is more of the TV networks and streaming services said, hey, advertisers, agencies, commit to spend with us, but if you want to use the programmatic pipes to execute on that money where they would have more flexibility, totally, you can do so. That was a big thing I was hearing about heading into the upfront market, because there was some concern on the sell side of like the rigidity of the upfront and to what extent that was going to scare folks away, because I think it was the year prior, if I'm not mistaken, the 2023 cycle, in which advertisers and agencies made their commitments in like the June, July timeframe. But then when it was time to put in the orders to actually like sign the contracts in August, September, a lot of that money fell out just because there was concern about the state of the economy at that point. And so the idea last year was, well, if we can allow advertisers and agencies to have their programmatic spend count towards these upfront commitments, that's going to be the flexibility that they want. That's going to be the revenue that we need. And so that was a big change. I've been talking to some agency execs in the past week about this year's upfront, what to expect. They're expecting a continuation of that. But last year was such a dramatic change that they don't expect it to be as like a step change beyond it. It's just kind of, this is now becoming more the norm in terms of how to do business with the upfront.
And was it open auction?
No, that's the thing. It's PG and PMP. And there has been the past couple of years tension between the buy side and sell side on whether these are PG or PMP deals. So the sellers obviously would prefer these to be programmatic guaranteed deals because then that money is secure. And that's the whole point of the upfront for them. The buyers want these to be private marketplace deals, PMPs, because that gives them a lot more flexibility. And it's kind of been going in both directions. Like I think we did a virtual event with an AB InBev exec. This would have been in 2022, where they were firmly committed to PMP deals. They didn't want anything to do with PG. So buyers have been holding steady to that because they like the flexibility of the PMP. But it's PMP or it's PG. It's not open market.
So do you think this year then we'll see like more, not necessarily kind of tension, but discussion around where it goes between PG and PMP then?
I think so. There may even be something of a, well, here, let's bring up the R word, recession.
Remnant. Yep.
No, remnant. that would be another one. No, recession's the one, just because last week with the S&P 500 kind of hitting that marker of being in a correction, the tariffs. I mean, you've been reporting on this stuff. A lot of folks on the Digiday team have been reporting on kind of the things are getting a little shaky economically again. Tariffs obviously are a big factor, and so in talking with these agency execs in the past week about this year's upfront, they are starting to get a little on edge about.
Interesting.
They still expect upfront spending to be up a bit this year compared to last year. It's kind of always going up. And the dropping CPMs in streaming help with that, but they're being more cautious about it. I mean, you even reported this week on Brian Weezer revising down his ad revenue forecast for 2024.
And what's interesting, just sticking with that point for a sec, is normally he talks about the market's ability to talk itself into a recession, but this time around he's just like no, like things are just bad. I think you can kind of see it in some of the sound bites doing around both in our sort of copy, but kind of elsewhere as well. It's grim. And he expects a lot more of that to shake out in the second half of the year.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to see how that goes. There was also another eMarketer chart that you had shared. I'm going to.
Yeah. But as you can kind of see, right, I think we talk about this shift playing out over several kind of years. And I think this sort of chart kind of sums that up, right? From sort of 2022, you can kind of see that spend into sort of direct deals kind of growing. It obviously sort of has slowed a little bit, from kind of 2024 onwards, but I can only imagine that's going to grow, particularly as things like curation start to become more of a driver of spend, which we're hearing from sort of SSPs, publishers, and advertisers alike that's definitely going to sort of become a bigger way of activating kind of programmatic campaigns moving forward.
Got it. Okay. So we've gone a little over half hour. We want to be mindful of everyone's time here, and we appreciate you all taking some time out of your day to spend with us. If you came in late, we will have a recording of this live stream going up on the Digiday YouTube channel later this week, so you'll be able to check that out there. Seb, this bold call that we've made of the programmatic open market is screwed. Do you feel like we have substantiated that enough, or have we kind of demystified ourselves?
No, I think as best as we could and as politically sound as we could, I think we've done a decent job given how much trouble we could have got into. I think we've kind of covered the main kind of beats and the main sort of viewpoints that we're getting in sort of market at the moment from publishers, advertisers, and agencies alike. So, yeah.
And so again, we'll do plug for Ronan's ad tech briefing, which will be going out later this week for anyone who wants to stay on top of the goings on with the programmatic open market, but just the programmatic market in general, guaranteed, PMPs, curation, all the different programmatic marketplaces that are out there. And as a thank you for you all tuning in today, we do have an offer for you. So you can save 40% on a 3-month Digiday Plus membership by just going to the link on the site. That's digiday.com/subscribe/exclusive offer. Also, if you go to this article on Digiday's site introducing the ad tech briefing, there is a link in there as well to the same 40% offer, a 3-month Digiday Plus membership. So as part of the Digiday Plus membership, you get access to Ronan's new ad tech briefing, as well as our media briefing, our marketing briefing, our media buying briefing, our featured TV briefing, as well as exclusive research that we do, and also exclusive story previews. So that is that for this. Before we go, I'm going to try to bring Ronan back just to wave and say hi to folks. How's it going, Ronan? Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your contributions to today's conversation.
Tim.
So, all right, and we will leave it there. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Seb, thanks Ronan, and thanks Courtney Marabella for controlling the back end of this stream. Have a good day, everyone.